All right, gang, we are going to be working through our 3.2a notes, parallel lines and transversals. We're going to go through the practice problems. We talked yesterday about how everything is related, and then in the notes we figured out all of our rules. So the first thing that I want to do is make sure that you have your goal for the day. Remember, we're going to identify the transversal and know how the 5 angle pairs are related when the lines are parallel. Get that all copied, pause your video, and then we will jump ahead to page 2. So in these first set of practice problems, we are going to do angle measures and parallel lines. So if you're given a picture and you know that the lines are parallel, we have to figure out how the angles are all related. We talked about filling in the angle measure, or shading the angle measures. So I know that if I have 123 degrees right there, I can fill in the 4 corners that all equal 123. So then that means that I can put 123 in all of these spots. And then it turns out that the other 4 spots are all going to be linear pairs or supplementary to the 123. If you notice, these 2 guys right here make a straight line. If I calculate 180 minus 123, I have 57 degrees. It turns out all of these angles that are left are going to be 57 degrees. So the nice part about these parallel lines is there really are only going to be 2 different sized angles, and you just have to figure out which ones are which. When we move on to letter B, again, we have a different angle there. Right there is 48. If we shade in all of the corners from 48, notice how they are both above on this side and then both below on this side. If we shade in all of the right corners, then we know that all of the blue dots are going to be 48 degrees. And then all of the other dots are going to be the supplement to 48 degrees. That will be 132 degrees. So we can fill that in on all of the other spots. Put my little degree marks on there, little degree marks on there. And that right there is just filling in basic angles on parallel lines. So let's pause right there and we will jump ahead to the next section. So on this guy right here, we will be finding all the value of x and justify, explain your reasoning using angle pair names. So if I look at this, the first thing that I notice is that we have that 15 degrees right there. And until I'm super comfortable with this, I would fill in all of the 15 degree marks. And the one thing I notice is that the x minus 5 is not got my green dot on it. So if I trace this one and I trace this one, I notice that they are both between the parallel lines. They asked me this question right here. Angles between the parallel lines are called what? Those are the interior angles. And so in this diagram, I need to figure out what kind of interiors those are. And the ones that use the C are the consecutive interiors. And when we looked at our notes, we just discovered that consecutive interior angles always equal 180 degrees. So if I want to set up an equation, I have 15 plus x minus 5. Those are my 2 angles right there, 15 and x minus 5. When I add those together, I get 180 degrees. To finish this guy off, I would do my like terms. 15 take away 5 is 10. X plus 10 equals 180. And then from there, I would minus 10 on both sides. Bring down the x. Those guys make 0. 170. It turns out that this x value right here is 170 degrees. 170 minus 5 equals 165 degrees. 15 degrees plus 165 degrees turns out to be supplementary angles, consecutive interiors. Now let's move on to D. When I look at these guys right here, I notice that I have, again, those interior angles. But when I look more closely and I fill in all of my shadings to find out which angles are equal, it turns out that all of those are underneath the pink dot. That means they must be equal. And the question is, why are they equal? Over here on the side, angles that form a Z are called what kind of angles? Those are the alternate interior angles. And those guys right there are always going to be equal. So what is our explanation for our equation? We write alternate interior angles equal. We write 135 equal to x minus 30. Now to solve this, remember I just have to get rid of that minus 30, so I do the opposite, plus 30 to both sides. If I add these two numbers, I get 165 and bring down my x. It turns out that x equals 165 degrees because the alternate interior angles are equal. If I did plug that right back in there, 165 minus 30 is equal to 135, the exact same angle that I have up there. The last question on the page, we're going to do these cubics problems. So what I would like you to do is pause right here, look those over, and see if you can fill in some of the angle measures, and then we will talk about the justifications or the reasons that you filled in those numbers. All right, these last few problems, we are going to really focus on our explanations on why angles are what they are. We're going to kind of think through our cubics strategy. We need to first always read the problem. It says, given the measure of one angle, find the measure of angle 1 and the measure of angle 2. Circle the angle that you find first. Justify your reason for each angle measure using the special angle pair names and how they are related. Now the one thing that I notice in this problem is that there's not a lot of numbers. The numbers are really in each individual question. So for this, we're going to highlight that number. Then what I would do before I get too deep into it is mark all of the angles that are also 115 degrees. And then you have to figure out the reason that you know the answers. Now it turns out in letter E, everything is 115 because everything is underneath the yellow dot. So I'm going to fill in right here, angle 1. It is 115 degrees. Why is that? Because these two angles make an F. Those are what we call corresponding angles, and they are always equal. This is the question that we did first. Does that make a difference? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. In this problem, for question number 2, I have to figure out how do I know that angle 2 is also 115 degrees. I can write two things. I might just want to keep using my 115, and I notice that I have alternate interior angles which are always equal. But I also might notice angle 2 is vertical to angle 1. So I could also write angle 15 because vertical angles are equal. Either one of those answers would be correct, but you would not be able to write the green one if you didn't do this first one, the blue one, first. If you didn't do this first, then you wouldn't be able to write that green statement. So sometimes it matters which angle you find first, and sometimes it doesn't. If we look at question F here, again, the first thing that I would do is highlight the angle that they give me. Angle F is 65 degrees. So I would fill in all of the 65-degree marks. So right there, I shaded all of my angles that are 65. And the first thing that I notice is angle 2 has to be 65 because it's green. Then I need to figure out why is it like that. So if I highlight this angle and I highlight this angle, I need to figure out, do they have a special angle name? And it turns out they do. Those guys are alternate exterior angles, and those are always equal. Then I have to figure out what is angle 1. Well, remember, everything in here is either going to be 65 or the supplement. So I subtract, and I get 115 degrees. I know that this angle 1 has to be 115 degrees. The question is why? And I can do one of two things. I can make a linear pair and say linear pair equals 180, or I can do consecutive exterior angles equal 180, but depending on which one I did first, it would matter. So in this case, we found angle 2 first, and then we were allowed to say either the red or the black. If we didn't find angle 2 first, then we wouldn't be able to use the consecutive exterior angle rule. So just to point out that sometimes it matters which ones you do first, sometimes it doesn't. But there are many different answers for these kinds of questions. The one thing I want to make sure that you know is that this is for sure one of those kinds of problems you need to study for the test, because you will see this. I want to understand not only can you get the answers, but do you know why the answers are correct. So make sure that you study these problems for the test. Try your homework, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.